Right. Okay. All right, this is Matt Madison. I'm gonna go ahead and call the Victor Conservation Board meeting to order at 6:32, we'll say. We're missing a couple folks, but we do have quorum. Andrew Phillips is here, Keith Parrish is here, and myself. We've got one item on the agenda today, which is the Norlick Solar Farm on Main Street in Fishers. The applicant's requesting approval to develop a 4.428 something MWAC solar energy facility on 34.93 acre parcel consisting of forest and meadowland. And we've got some folks here from that project. And so the board did have a chance to review, and I know we've this has come before us before, so we're somewhat familiar with it, but maybe give some updates and let us know where we stand right now.
So I'm James Greenpost, Zero One BME. This is Steve Saunders. He's with Norwood Solar Farms. As Matt just said, we were before you guys, I think in March, early March last year. This was before the town went to their solar moratorium updated code. The MWAC is a megawatt.
Megawatt.
I was wondering,
but I didn't wanna, yeah, thank you for.
Yep. So our project is on Main Street Fishers. We're right at the county line. The county line is to the west of us, which is up on the screen over there. As I mentioned, the solar code was updated, so the project's very consistent with what we were here before. We're basically building an access drive, gravel drive with turnaround that facilitate tractor trailers as well as construction equipment up to an equipment pad area. And then we have static solar panels that will always be facing St. Hill, always facing south on this site. The roads running east to west. So the drive comes up, it's an existing drive that's already there. At one point it was paved, but it's years and years ago, it's beat up gravel, so we're gonna obviously rebuild that. And then make a new connection out onto Main Street Fishers there. The project itself is now complying with the new setbacks, which are basically the main things that change in the code. You know, 100-foot setback minimum on all sides, whereas before it was based on the underlying zoning and accessory structures. So I think we were around like a 15-foot requirement. I believe we actually worked in the range of like 50 to 75-foot setbacks, just to help with some of the screening from the existing vegetation. But today now we're complying with the 100-foot setback everywhere. We also, the other big change was the 300-foot residential setback from the non-participating adjacent residence's primary structure. So this comes into play at two locations for us on the east and west. It's basically where you can kind of tell we're kind of bubbling out. And in that area, we're not going to touch any of the vegetation. We're just going to leave it completely as is. We're not going to propose anything. Our fence is going to be located outside of that. We did talk with code enforcement and got them to clarify that the setback is to the solar panels, not to the fence line for this. They told us we could put the fence around the property if we wanted, but based on what we typically do, we basically just maintain a 20-foot perimeter access drive around for service vehicles or regular maintenance on the site. Like I mentioned, this is very consistent with what we did before. However, we did incorporate a couple of other town comments, some things about fire access and things of that nature. So now we do have, like, if you go to one of the keep going a couple. There should be one on the whole site. Yeah, maybe it might be back at the very beginning then, or even just go to the cover sheet. Yeah, leave it right there. Perfect. Yeah, thank you. So we did create kind of right after our tractor trailer vehicle turnaround that would support emergency vehicles. We have I think it's like a 25-foot access right up the middle of the panels now. We're also going to be putting some electrical lines and stuff underground that'll run from the panels back to the equipment pad. From the equipment pad, which is right at the turnaround area, there'll be a series of transformers, inverters, and we'll have basically a main voltage line running out down to Main Street Fishers, and then we'll have a series of 6 poles drive where they'll have the final transformers before we connect into the public utility.
So it's above ground? Getting it from the site to the
No, all the lines are underground until we get to those poles, and then it's just like a typical utility pole you see with those two kind of like transformers.
Yeah.
There's a series of about 6 of them. They're usually spaced between 30 to 50. So those will kind of line our drive and kind of come up into the site. Clearing of the site, still very consistent with what we did for it. It's actually a little bit less. If you remember, the site's kind of consistent of low meadow area. I'll call it a thick brush area, and then a more, it's not like mature woods, but it's definitely more established at the northern end of the site. We're only looking at actually clearing about 2.1 acres of what we're calling real trees. And I apologize, I know this is an audio, but I did bring a couple photos that I have submitted online. So this is like the real woods up at the north end of the site. This is, we're not touching this. This is one of the kind of ravines that starts to channelize where that kind of finger comes out there where the fence kind of shapes in weirdly in that corner.
Yeah.
So we're staying right out of that.
I was wondering why you had that.
Yeah, we're not sure if it's a regulated feature there. It typically wouldn't be based on that, but it's where it concentrates, the grade drops down. It's a lot easier for us to just avoid it. This is the brush. So this is like the real brush. You can't walk through it. It's nothing special. And then it transitions very clearly. This is actually the eastern side of the project. Right along our property line, you can see we have the mature vegetation to the west of us a little bit. And then the brush kind of turns right into that.
But the Army Corps engineer, but
So we did a delineation a couple of years ago before we did the regular project. We submitted this to the Army Corps. We already have our PJD, so our jurisdictional determination. There's 3 wetlands on the south end of the site. You can kind of see the little outlines, and then there's a couple up in that northwestern corner. Yeah, we're not touching anything in the northwestern corner. The way the Army Corps handles this nowadays is if we aren't proposing any development for solar projects specifically because they have so many that are coming in. If we're not proposing any development in the wetland areas itself, they basically would just say you don't need a permit, so that PJT would work. It's a little different from this application to the original one is now with the extra setbacks kind of swishing us in, as well as the residential buffers, our whole layout pushed a lot south. To maintain the same number of panels to basically make sure the project works
I was
economically.
gonna ask if it squished to the point where it wasn't viable anymore.
Right.
But-
We're still viable. We still hit the targets now. Obviously, we just incorporate or utilize a little bit more of the space. Kind of, we really weren't too much south of where that turnaround is, and now we're kind of quite a bit south. But these wetlands, in our opinion, they would be deemed isolated, and now that we are doing work within them, we will be submitting to the Army Corps. But what we expect is they would either deem these as isolated and then we can do whatever we want, or they will take them as jurisdictional. However, that doesn't preclude us from doing work in them for the solar projects because we're allowed to drive posts, set racks through them. Doesn't count as ground disturbance, and that is an allowed action. The only things that we need to do while we're working in there, work on mats. So basically, they would go in, work on mats, not disturb the ground at all, drive their posts for the racking system. Then whenever they're doing setting up the panels or anything on that, they work on it. So there are notes on the plans, basically detailing that what would happen, but we will be following up with the Army Corps and providing additional information to the town there. The only thing that would be a permitted action would be if we do any underground utility trenching there. That's typically covered under a nationwide permit though, and the action that we have doesn't result in a loss of the wetlands. Still work on mats, dig the material out, set it on mats, put the electrical stuff in, put the material right back, and then reseed it with like a OBL wetland mix if you have to. Basically, they don't count that as a loss, so they don't generally, at least on any of the solar projects we've done so far, haven't made us do any mitigation or anything like that. But same thing, they would actually issue a no permit required based on your plans and what. So we have submitted to the New York State DEC for the new determination for their wetland system, although technically the most recent guidance from them is if you have a consultant involved, you actually don't need to do that. You can actually skip that process. And I know they've been telling all the towns, so we're dealing with this across the board. Every town is now requiring this to be done for, we can move on with the process, but there are no federal or I'm sorry, there are no state wetlands out here. Everything is well below, the 12 acres, and we're not in any of pink blob areas for the urban plans and what they would classify based on their mapping. Obviously, they could still come back and say something different. If that did happen, we would go down that route, but we do expect that back shortly. I think we submitted that in January sometime. We're obviously past our, whatever their time frame is, but they haven't met that on any of these that we've submitted on this year. Generally, what we do is send them a letter saying, hey, you now have 10 days to respond to us, and then sometimes to react if they are, but obviously we'll coordinate any other information we need on that. Besides that, there really isn't too much change. We have effectively no grading in the solar panel fields, just basically remove all the
Clear, but
vegetation.
no grading.
Yeah.
Okay.
The solar guidance from the DEC actually changed within the last like 6 months. Between what we had done before for this, however, methodology is still generally the same. They just changed some of their thresholds. Basically, they want you to have these not concentrate and maintain a sheet flow pattern as the water runs off to help it promote and basically act like a grass filter strip type of practice. We have level spreaders spaced. We had them before, spaced throughout based on kind of topography here. Because it doesn't just sheet flow off, basically maintain that sheet flow condition over the period it would need to before it runs to the downstream. There is no, for drainage patterns, it still splits kind of north-south down the middle. We have no basically impervious surfaces or anything that would result in an increase in runoff going to the north, which all makes its way down into that, where it concentrates and then goes under the New York State Thruway into a big wetland across the way. At the south end, we basically are collecting all of our impervious surface from our gravel drive and then kind of the immediate area on the access drive, taking it down the east side of the drive. And right before the property narrows to the width, we're doing a stormwater facility there. It's going to be a larger bioretention with a little bit extra storage to make sure that it stays below the ponding requirements. And that's just going to discharge right back to that existing swale, which then kind of runs down. There's an outline of the facility. That discharges right back into that roadside swale, which then kind of peters off down into the neighboring property before it hits the floodplain, slowly makes its way over into the pond. That's in the property, I believe, further to the east from us. Obviously, I wish there was a better drainage path for this, but this is the way it goes under existing conditions. We're complying with all the typical DEC requirements, really knocking down the rates there and really not even taking more drainage there. Because all we're doing is basically that little bit of road from basically the pond up is the only new impervious surface that we have.
Right.
And that we're maintaining that, and I don't think it goes through. I believe everything like through the 10 or maybe the 25-year storm through Workfest. So we're talking extremely minimal discharges from anything that we're doing at the site. Everything else maintaining existing drainage patterns. So it's just gonna sheet flow or property lines or concentrate in a couple of spots it does before it leaves the property. Erosion control, same idea. It's very basic. Perimeter silt fence, check dams along the access drive where we're rebuilding it, concrete washout, stabilized construction entrance. Nothing fancy here. There are some notes about, again, the wetlands, working on mats in there. We may put some more construction fence around them to protect them, just identify the areas. It's pretty typical. We've been doing on other sites, just so that the workers know that they can't go in there. Staging for the project, we're going to probably stage in 2 areas. One would be the turnaround, which is where we have equipment pads right initially. That works for functionality pretty well. We're also gonna have a staging area just kind of to the north of the pond right here. As we build our way out, we need an extra area for laying down and things of that nature. Construction, being that this is a 5 megawatt site, it's gonna be pretty quick compared to a lot of the other ones. They're gonna come in, basically get that road built, clear it, and then they're gonna work their way north to south, probably work their way around. Perimeter vegetation for the neighbors. Now that we're maintaining that 300-foot buffer, this is the buffer we're protecting. The house actually, this is at the south, this is the northern buffer. This is the house right here. This is your 300-foot of stuff that's gonna stay. So there's very, very good screening already in place. On the house right there, basically right where that arrow is touching the kind of our 300-foot bubble, this picture is looking at that house. There's the roof of that other house. So same thing, even in this leaf off condition, So this is in the middle of winter, that brush is so thick there, you really don't have good views. Into that, and
How long
we're,
do they stand? The units themselves? What's the pitch? Tall are they, you know?
12.
are they 12 on this one?
Yeah.
I have 16 in my head, but those are the tracking panels.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, these are 12 feet static, and I believe they have about a 30% tilt. So if you're driving up into the site, you would, you'll start to see them. But if you're looking at through the scattered trees on the throughway, you're gonna see the back of them, you're not gonna have any visibility or glare. And then basically because of this brush line to the east of us, I would contend that there's almost zero views anywhere to the east of us. And even to the north, there's very minimal views. I mean, we provide, as part of the application, we provided a view shed study, glare study, and a noise study. Those are all updated per the new layouts. The view shed study identifies some areas of the island, to the south as you kind of go up some of the hills across the way, as well as to the west of us. However, in reality, you can't see it from anywhere. Because the only thing that our view shed model takes into account is National Land Cover Database for what are considered forested or wooded areas, which are treated as opaque. So we're extremely conservative on this. It doesn't factor in houses, buildings, structures, brush, anything like that. So, I mean, we even took some kind of drive-bys of the couple areas of where the visibility is identified. You can't see it. You're looking through a lot of the houses. If you factored in things like that, you really not have any visibility. The only people that may see this at all are gonna probably be the immediate residents looking through that big vegetation that's gonna remain.
They face south.
Panels face south, yeah.
Yeah.
Then, what's gonna be underneath, what's underneath the panels? Grass
Biomix.
or
Yeah,
biomix?
low maintenance meadow mix, mow like twice a year, just something that doesn't grow too fast.
Do you have to, how do you mow that? Can you get underneath there with a,
Yeah.
you gotta push more to get underneath? Can you use a rider up and down the?
Yep, yeah, they can take a rider up and down the main things. I mean, they might have to get in there with a smaller piece of equipment to get under there, but again, it's something they only have to do a couple times
Yeah.
a year as needed.
Of what?
Wetland area, they may have to do some different things depending on the condition it's in. The first time I went out to the site, they were all dry. Last time I was out a couple of months ago, there was some standing water in the big one there. The other two were. In the area, the whole site is kind of, that kind of mossy stuff in some areas. In other areas, it's really nice. Norbit does own the property, so you guys obviously want to visit the site. Feel free to stop by, check it out. You don't need to let anybody know. If you are visiting the site, my suggestion, you can drive right up to basically where it widens out. There's a little animal shelter right there. You can't miss it. You can park right there. I would not recommend going any further than that. Don't drive with vehicles. There's basically a center walkway. You can walk right down the middle. You'll see the open meadow area in the southern part. And then once you get to the brush, the loop loops around, but you can kind of sneak out at the northern end into the wooded areas. And basically how we established the wooded areas was we went on site with a handheld GPS and just walked the perimeter.
Yeah.
Took shots. And we just did this a couple months ago because of the town code requirement, which is that we can't clear more than 10% of wooded area of the total property. We're leaving about 6%, so we are compliant with that. Besides that, that's pretty much the project. I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, Steve can answer anything related to like missions on. But these projects are very straightforward from a development standpoint. We're building a long driveway and I'm setting up a bunch of hoops.
Is it it's 4.4 megawatts. Is that big, small, average?
This is probably one of the smallest sites I think you
Yeah.
guys.
Generally, we do 10 megawatts, sometimes 15. So, as a matter of fact, I think this is the only project that's less than 10 megawatts that's in our portfolio.
I think once you get above, I believe 25 or higher.
Yeah,
it's
25, it goes to a different regulatory bodies than.
State.
Sure, yeah.
So we wouldn't even be talking to you guys with the planning board. We get to like circumvent with you if we're at that, but. I don't think we haven't done too many with you guys at that
Oh,
size.
no, we don't do this much.
Yeah, so this is on the smaller end, so again, it's gonna be one construction season. Won't be phased beyond just whatever we're gonna phase internally. Just kind of working on different areas. We just made a 5 acre waiver for it.
What's the lifespan then of the panels? I think we've talked about this before, but How long it's supposed to last and be viable?
The project has got about 25 to 35. And, there may be some occasional replacement of panels that may fail, but for the most part, once the construction's done, you'll see minimal,
Yeah,
personnel on site.
Yeah.
And, on occasion,
and the moving twice a
but
year.
very infrequent visitation by.
What happens in 25 or 35 years? Is it? It's hard to answer.
Sure.
Technology will be different then, but.
Right, well, basically, we've got a called a decommissioning plan, which explains what we would do in the event that at the end of the life cycle, the project is due. That point, we've got a very comprehensive plan that talks about everything that we have to do in terms of having the site bonded so that all the equipment can be and disposed of properly, and essentially, the property is gonna go back to the state that it's in now. It's just gonna remain in that state.
This is not an agricultural property, it's not in an ag district. If it were, there's some ag markets requirements and some other things that we need to do. We don't need to do this here. Like the Victor 2 project that is no longer going anywhere and obviously out of the allowable zoning, if that was in an ag district, that would have some other different procedures. Yeah.
Sure.
It's just some testing and some other conservation requirements, but here is actually a steep side. They basically have enough money in the decommissioning to completely remove everything from the site and restabilize it effectively. I think the other alternative from these guys would be you may be putting up some newer, more high efficient panels, maybe.
Yeah, and like you said, depending on the technology and grant programs that's available, that all that determine future what life cycle project.
The nice thing about this one, the static panels, you don't have the motors and things like that.
Right.
You can worry about. You can just take the panel off, put the new panel on, if that's.
Yeah, and you mentioned Norbert owns this.
Yeah.
plant, So effectively in 25, 30 years, if it's not needed anymore, you decommission it and sell a parcel of land, just like anybody
Yeah,
else.
it's still zoned R2 residential,
Yeah.
it's still good to build a single family home or two up there.
What's your timeline for construction?
Once it begins, or
Yeah, I mean, what's the next meeting you're going to?
We are at the planning board next Tuesday.
Yeah.
We're at the county next Tuesday and Wednesday as well. Planning board, we don't expect them taking action, obviously, because county regular meetings not until the following night. Being that this is a pretty straightforward project, I'm assuming we'll get most of the input from the planning board at the first meeting. Provide all responses, and then I would imagine that they would take an action. And there's nothing tricky from a environmental standpoint. I mean, we'll probably provide some supplemental information. We're gonna provide like a photo context package, showing some of this. If they have any questions or want some additional supporting information on like the view shed, or anything like that, obviously provide that. I think in terms of context, we're now fully compliant with everything in the zoning code, the updated one. This wouldn't be any different than the other project of this nature, so.
But they put. Just me being an engineer now, but do they put like, if they reflect some coatings on those?
there is, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's still some
There is still some there, yep, yeah, they,
flag.
yeah, pretty much, that's
Yeah.
pretty standard now, but that has actually taken into account in the glare analysis software, like we do, they put on what type of glass they're using, whether it's just like a regular reflective or textured or one with like an anti-reflective. I'm pretty sure everyone you guys have ever used has had an anti-reflective coating.
Standard operating procedures.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the glare study analyzes observation points from all the adjacent homes at normal standing height and then a second story like window height as well. All the roads are analyzed from typical viewing, car viewing height, truck viewing heights, and we also review all the airports, approach runways and everything within the area. But in general, the way the solar panels are is the glare isn't a problem of any kind for pilots. The only time it is if the glare is causing to a air traffic control tower. So you have to be in pretty close proximity
Yeah, right.
and have visibility to an air traffic control tower with the panels for that to come. So
there's nothing in the panels that could leak or somehow leach into the ground underneath.
They're not non-combustible, non-corrosive materials, yeah, they're used to being in the weather all year round, so. Really pretty much, they're not a fire hazard. I mean, the only things on the site that are, potentially flammable typically are equipment pad areas, which again, we have an emergency fire truck turnaround,
Sure.
adjacent to that. We don't see any of these projects bringing in like water services or anything like that, just because to get set up with that doesn't get used or turned over. That's no problems, not that they would be using it for. Yes.
I think pretty cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like you wanna move on this summer.
Yeah.
Ideal.
I don't know what your construction schedule will be, but yeah, if we got the approvals with them pretty quick, I think you
Yeah.
guys would probably get ready to do this as well.
Break ground. Big deal.
What's your, then how long is the construction?
8 to 12 months. That should be pretty quick.
Oh, that's.
I bet it's on the shorter side of that.
Yeah.
You have it up spring and summer and get it operational. I mean, I don't have any other comments. I mean, any questions that I would have had, you basically had answered it or have already addressed. You want to have no comments.
How do you determine the static versus the dynamic?
So,
I've always wondered. I know it's not part.
I don't
of
know how they evaluated, but I mean, I believe the tracking panels produce a little bit more.
Yeah.
They start at like those rows, if you ever see them, they run north-south instead of east-west.
Yeah.
And they'll start off, typically the ones we use are 60 degrees facing
Yes,
east,
60,
and they follow the sun, and then they either sit at the spot and then reset flat at the end of the day. Those are a lot more efficient. They cost
They
more
are.
though.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. There's gotta be a trade, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for a site this size and given the configuration, tracking didn't make sense.
Yeah, they have photovoltaic engineers that kind of look at that stuff for them before. I think about that. To me, it's posts in the ground. I mean,
Yeah.
it's metal still,
Yeah.
like it's barely like, I almost don't even consider it
Yeah, you don't
like
have
a
to worry
perfect
about
service, yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I've always wondered.
Anything else, Andrew, there? Anything else, Keith? Good. Okay, I don't also have any more comments. Any comments? Anything else you wanted to?
Just curious. The noise, you have transformers? Is there any noise associated with those
Yep,
transformers?
yeah, so we have a noise study that we submitted as part of the application. So we model the noise that comes off of the transformers and inverters, so you get like a typical like little hum. So like any typical noise study, they establish a noise ratio at a certain distance in a controlled setting. So I don't remember the specifics of what this one has been saying. It's 50 decibels at 3 feet. Then there's a series of equations that you can use to model when there's multiple of those units. So I believe this one has string inverters, so there's like 4 to 10 like small inverters that all generate this little bit of noise together. It's not like an additive thing, it's kind of like a logarithmic thing. And then what we do is we basically assume there are no obstructions anywhere. So basically we have cut down all the vegetation, there are no solar panels, there's nothing in the way. And then it's a straight logarithmic equation. Every time you double the distance, you take off, I think it's like 5 decibels or something like that. So where we're at the property lines, so when we did the noise study, we set a analysis point basically at the northeast, south and west locations from the property. And then we also set them at some of the closest house receptors. Let's see if I have.
House would be feet away.
More than that, it's from where the inverters are. The panels don't make any noise at all.
No, it's just the inverters.
Right.
The 45 decibels is the limit. Speed, any of the receptor points. The southeast residence is 34, south residence is 33, west residence 38. The highest is 44 on the east residence, but they're all below 45 decibels.
Yeah, 45 is what the DEC considers a quiet rural site. So like what you would see out in the farm field or something like that. I mean, we're not saying that there's no noise,
Yeah,
but
right.
obviously the noise generated from this is just the. Machines going.
Right.
And
Right.
I was
No,
just
no,
gonna
no.
say, it's only
It's
by during the day,
Right,
right?
because
Sun's
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's down here in the winter either, here, not here, or much of the spring.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know it's your.
You'd actually be surprised how much
We
the
can
panels work
penetrate.
with the cloudy cover, so.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have, does affect it, but it's, I was told it wasn't huge.
Good question.
Yeah. Awesome. Welcome to stay, but I think we're all set as far as questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good luck with your project. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. You got, if anything else comes up. You know,
Can I just put up the question? Just put. What drives the solar panel? Is it the infrared? Is it ultraviolet light? Is it photons that are absorbed or exactly how this?
That I don't.
That's a little bit above my pay grade.
Come on, the sun does it.
Besides general, it's not UV, it's
Yeah.
not the infrared, it's.
It's,
The invisible, that means you have, you know, when you break it up, it's a prism. Is it any particular one?
That, I don't know, it's probably towards the lower end, because it's probably towards the more of the UV end. Because that has the more
Yeah.
power, but it is in the visible,
Okay.
so like 600 or 500 to 700. Off the top of my head.
It's gonna question you on it, so.
Someone probably will.
As far as I know,
on
that's-
YouTube.
Yeah, this guy's what I was talking about. Okay. Anything else?
yeah, they were.
No, thank you. Very, very
We're
kind.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Matt, Keith, Andrew, I will see you
All right.
guys soon.
Thanks, Evan.
Good luck.
Right, moving on, other business, we got approval of the May 20th, 28-25 minutes. And those were sent to us after the fact. I reviewed, I didn't have any issues with it. Keith, any updates or changes that needed to be made? Okay. Andrew, anything?
It was good, but I can't. Found it.
Ah, alright, well, I think we determined that we still can vote, right? Because you would have reviewed the notes.
Well, at least second.
Yeah, so, do you wanna?
Be accepted?
Alright, you second that then?
Second.
Alright, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, none. That's it for other business. Anything else anybody wanted to bring up? We have our liaison today. Away from the town today. Away from the town today. Alright, and looking for a motion to adjourn.
That.
Alright, second that, all in favor, aye, so we'll adjourn at 7:06. Thanks.
Cool. Boy, I hope I'm right.